Hello, this is Alex. Welcome to Socialism Survival Podcast number 31. Today I will talk about Chernobyl, great socialist catastrophe. But before I'll continue on the subject, let's do short but important part, our virtual housekeeping and community organizing. Did you see my site already? Please visit socialismsurvival.com. Please spread the word, introduce others to this podcast, and let others to learn something they only can hear from Socialism Survival podcast host Alex. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. Revelations chapter 8 verses 10 to 11. Chernobyl in Ukrainian means mugwort or common wormwood. On April 26, 1986, exactly 24 years ago, a nuclear accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the country of my birth, the Ukraine, which then was known as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, as it was a part of the Soviet Union. It is considered the worst nuclear power plant accident in history and is the only level 7 event on the international nuclear event scale, which means major accident with a large off-site impact with widespread health and environmental effects. It resulted in a severe release of radioactivity due to so-called power excursion that destroyed one of the site's reactors. Most fatalities from the accident were caused by radiation poisoning. 2 operators died at the time of explosion, but by the end of July 1986, total number of fatalities was 30 people. Many of them died from radiation overdose. About 200,000 people, called liquidators, from all over the Soviet Union were involved in the recovery and cleanup during 1986 and 1987. They received high doses of radiation, and many of them died in the following years from various illnesses caused by radiation. Also, many civilians who lived in the surrounding areas that were contaminated suffered from radiation, and over 300,000 were evacuated and resettled. There is a lot of information you can find about this disaster all over the internet, and I will include links in my blog post for this podcast. I'd like to continue with my own experience, as I lived in the Soviet Ukraine at that time. Chernobyl disaster area and my hometown are connected by the Dnieper River. Soviet government was not clear and not quick in informing own people on what exactly happened that April day and what were dangers of the exposure to radiation, contaminated water of Dnieper River. I remember we were told not to swim in the river, but probably too late for many people. Some people, being unaware, were fishing and consuming poisoned fish. Through the years following the explosion, far away from Chernobyl, in my home city, I saw consequences of Chernobyl disaster in many lives. Some people from my area were among liquidators. Some whom I met were resettled from Chernobyl. Because of how Soviet socialist regime treated own people, we didn't have proper access neither to vital information, not to so much needed health care. Well, what to say? It explains all. We had universal socialistic health care. I know no one in my city who received preventive care from radiation. No one received help from post-accident anxiety that overwhelmed Ukrainian population. Majority of Ukrainians remained largely unsure of what the effects of radiation actually were and retained strong inner feeling of notion of a future misfortune, especially young people who had been exposed to various amounts of radiation felt that they are somehow fatally flawed and resorted to frequent addictive use of alcohol and illegal drugs. Some of such young people gave birth to babies with multiple defects and terminal illnesses. I visited local city orphanage many times and I saw many with my own eyes. Yes, I saw many little innocent victims of that catastrophe. It was hard to hold back tears while watching babies born with cancer, born without limbs or lips, but most importantly, without any hope for a better future that was promised but never given to anyone. Instead, Soviet socialist regime gave them unimaginable suffering right from their birth. If Soviet Union had different economic system, that disaster would probably never happen. If there was different health care in USSR, more kids would be born normal than defected. Even without Chernobyl catastrophe, life in Soviet Union was full of anxiety. Can you imagine how much more hopelessness and despair increased there after accident happened and after government did very little to nothing to protect own citizens. Well, what you say if people like my family actually needed someone to offer us protection from Soviet government? There are a lot of lessons for Americans to learn from Chernobyl tragedy. Liberals must learn that by electing socialist government that don't care about borders protection and prosecuting terrorists, they are responsible for welcoming possible nuclear attack on America. They will be responsible for the death of their loved ones, friends, and colleagues. We, as conservatives, must learn that from now on we are responsible for protecting our families and communities, like churches or synagogues. We need to understand that by opening borders for nuclear attack and by destroying American healthcare, government shows that it cares more for terrorists and illegals than for the US citizens and for legal residents. Forget, therefore, all these empty promises. We cannot expect government to take care of our future because they are charging too much for their services they will never be able to provide. Learn how to protect your family and your home from radiation. If you live in a big city, have a bug out place away from the city where you could survive. Plan to be self sufficient in many aspects of your life. It is taking care of your health, producing your own food, learning how to have clean drinking water, and how to shelter yourself from possible disasters. I'm not saying that to know how to make signboards for tea parties is bad idea. We need to make anything possible to remove socialists from power. But first, science will not shield you from nuclear radiation unless you have both science and wonders. And second, we don't know how new politicians will behave after being elected in November. We hear even today there are some rhinos who are willing now to jump on board with socialists to share control over Americans' health. Hopefully, better people will be elected, replacing them and socialists. But who can guarantee? Nobody will sell you insurance for protection from bad government. Constitution should be that insurance, but it's not honored anymore by those who must uphold it. Socialists are the magnets for catastrophes, and America is so close to it as never before. My friends, let's do our part to keep America from becoming second Chernobyl and prepare to survive if anything like that happens. Soviet people used to joke even while suffering. Chernobyl catastrophe also gave birth to many anecdotes. Here are some. In the session, Supreme Council of the Ukraine decides what to do with the soil around Chernobyl. It cannot be used for sowing grains, no use for root crops like beets and carrots. One council member suggests, let's sow all fields with tobacco and write on cigarette packs, Ministry of Health warns for the last time. And another short joke. Near Chernobyl, somebody found computer with 2 mice. Well, my friends, although I like humor, I will make another serious point before closing this show. There are many natural disasters that can happen in any country, no matter of its political orientation. Talking about Chernobyl catastrophe, we should understand that it is a man-made disaster that with proper approach and measures could be avoided. In this case, it is often preceded by moral and spiritual disaster or degradation. That is like sowing seeds for the future harvest. Tyrants like Joseph Stalin didn't get to their position without someone's help. Stalin was put into his position by Politburo, most of whom he later executed. It is moral disaster when people were sending to death members of their own families just to survive themselves. It is spiritual disaster when majority of the people agrees with atheistic propaganda and stands in opposition to God's authority. Whole Soviet system based on socialistic ideology was a disaster, morally, spiritually, economically. Then Chernobyl explosion shook the country and whole world. And just in 5 years, Soviet Union collapsed and ceased to exist. But people of the Ukraine and other affected countries suffered and will suffer more the consequences of Soviet socialism failure. Those who built socialism in America now will be gone. Their phony creation will collapse, but future generations will reap the bitter harvest of their stupidity and godlessness. That's not the way I envision the future for my children and grandchildren. What about you, my listener? Get off the brainwashing hook. They don't give you time to think, bombarding your brains with never stopping insistence. Here, you have whole week to think until you hear again the voice of common sense, your Socialism Survival host, Alex.